You can get consolation from all sorts of falsehoods, but because it's consoling, it doesn't mean it's true.
No, there are a lot of very religious scientists around.
Science, there is no evidence for any kind of supernatural being of any
You
kind.
think people should not have a choice of what to do with their body?
Anti-murdering the unborn.
And I say to the grown-ups, if you want to deny evolution and live in your world that's completely inconsistent with everything we observe in the universe, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need
But why should I believe? Well, because it's the truth.
Now we're in part 2, which is why am I a Christian?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the first part where I would go with that is growing up in a Christian household. That's just kind of the default belief.
Yeah.
Like Christianity's true
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you've been told.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever really completely went away from that. I think I've
Mm-hmm.
doubted that and kind of not necessarily explored other faiths, but just doubted that faith.
Okay. In what way doubted it? Like,
just like, is it true that like I'm actually going to go to hell when I die?
okay.
Like, are these things that I've been told actually true?
Doubted in the sense that God exists?
I don't know if I've had doubts about that.
Yeah.
But I've never would say I don't believe he exists.
Okay.
I think I've always believed he exists, but maybe not fully, maybe doubting some things about exactly what that is.
Yeah, okay.
But I definitely don't think I would ever say I've ever thought that there is no God.
Okay.
I've never thought that. Not to say that that's good or bad. It's just I've just never thought that.
No.
But I think what really has drove me into it when I've gone away and wavered and come back.
Yeah.
And when I became, I guess I'll just share my testimony real quick and then we'll start from there.
All right.
So I used to pray every day. I'd be like, God, save my soul. I do not want to go to hell.
Yeah.
Like, please save me. And I would just do that every day.
I imagine it probably gave you a lot of anxiety too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And just having no assurance and just always feeling like you didn't measure up and you're going to go to hell when you die. And you better pray this prayer. And if you say it right and mean it, then you're going to go to heaven.
Okay.
And when I got into my early teens, I started to, obviously I was obsessed with basketball and that was like my idol. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I was getting into girls, a lot of these idols, and I pursued those for
What do you mean by idol?
like things that I valued as supreme.
Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't God.
Yeah.
And even though I believed that God existed.
So it's not like you're worshiping them. You're just like, I value this very highly.
Yeah, it was like, this is the meaning of my life.
Okay. Yeah. So you're identifying so strong with these. That's like the meaning for your life. Like what you
it was like if there's that girl you like, if you've got that girl and you're getting good at basketball and you're getting praise for these things, like that's the meaning of life. And I guess it just got to a point where I was reading the Bible too and being convicted of these things that I was doing. And I always felt the need for...
What is be convicted? What does that mean?
Convicted would be like...
Having guilt about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Or just feeling like you're in the wrong.
Okay.
Like you're doing something
like it's wrong that you're doing those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's always a feeling of moral accountability, I guess. And that drove me to Scripture and seeing what Christ had done for me.
Okay.
And I always felt the need for forgiveness because I always prayed that.
Yeah.
And I always obviously would feel bad when you do bad things. And the idolization of these other things became so great that I recognized how evil I really was.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be rescued from that. So I finally, like, I don't know how you describe it, I guess, prayed and meant it. Like, I finally saw myself for who I really was. And I saw the darkness that I could become. Do I want to be somebody who's made my entire life about basketball?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
And I saw through Scripture, I saw that God loved me and wanted to forgive me for those things.
Okay. Yeah.
And anyway, so that's kind of where it goes. So I asked to receive Christ, become a Christian.
Yeah.
And I felt like it satisfied that need for forgiveness.
Okay.
So that's kind of where it all starts.
Why did you have a need for forgiveness, though?
Yeah. I think it's programmed into us. I think it's inherent in everyone that I do believe there's an objective, like, moral law. Like, murder is wrong no matter what you believe about it. I think it's legitimately wrong.
No, but why did you, need forgiveness? Because it seems like you need forgiveness from someone else.
Yes,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. So why that?
And that's what's weird about it, because you're doing
Did you
things.
harm someone else?
Oh no.
No.
And that's what's so strange about it. And it is, I guess, what you're being taught in Christianity.
Yeah.
But you really do feel like you've transgressed against something that is beyond people.
Okay. Yeah.
And I believe that's because the moral law is a real law that we're all held accountable to.
Okay.
And when you transgress it, you feel bad about it. Just like if you did something that you knew no one else knew.
Yeah.
It didn't even hurt anybody else.
But you knew it was morally and ethically wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Like
would
no
feel
one would
bad
ever
about
find out you stole those $10, but you stole them.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I guess when I became a Christian, I really felt that conviction.
Okay.
Beyond what just, I don't want to go to hell now. It was, wow, I'm a sick person.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think if I hadn't been in the things that I was in, I never would have really become a genuine Christian.
Yeah.
Because most people don't realize how evil they are. And
Well, that's funny because I don't want to break up your.
I would say I
explanation.
finally did.
Okay, that's interesting because I kind of in a roundabout way came to a similar conclusion, but it's very different. But it's so when I was studying evolution and evolutionary processes, and you realize that humans are a product of, we're just apes, really. We're apes with machinery on top of us. It really made me much more accepting of other people and not judgmental at all, because I realized in a lot of ways like that we're the product of an evolutionary process, and that product has formed our morality. When you look at the apes and you see them beating one another, you realize, and then you see humans beating one another, you see them behaving the same behavior. What you would call evil, I would just call, a byproduct of our past, right? And so I see it as one of those things that needs fixing, but not something that needs, you should resent people for or hate people for. It's like hating gravity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I just feel like with regards to that, like the evolutionary process, I guess we see it as a negative consequence when those things happen.
Yeah.
But also I think like seeing how wrong it is, like what right is.
Yeah.
You know what wrong is because you know what right is.
Yeah.
It's like we know the right way to act. Therefore we can recognize when there's a wrong way to act.
Yeah.
I think that standard comes beyond ourselves.
Okay. Yeah. See, I think that standard is something we develop over time as societies, as we make observations and observe, what's wrong, what's right. We can pass. We're the first species to be able to learn in our lifetimes and to pass our learnings on to the next generation so that they can be better than we are. No other species can do that. They're bound to the evolutionary process. Apes can only ever be apes and can only improve if the evolutionary environment changes such that they, learn to be better apes,
Yeah.
But they won't learn it in their lifetime. That whole generation will die. And that process the environment will still have to remain the same for generations and generations for their ethics to improve. But our ethics can improve in a lifetime, in one person. And we can pass that on to the next generation. And when you study, the development of ethics over time, you see that. You see each generation like struggling with the evils of their time, the dictators, the tyrants, the atrocities of the Second World War, and then the ethical and moral responses to that we develop.
Yeah.
So that's how I view it, as an evolution, also sort of like an evolutionary process that we're improving and chiseling a statue that we're chiseling over time, and that will only be better for generations to come if we can continue working hard.
Yeah. And I do think there is progress.
Yeah.
But I think it's progress towards realizing what's already there, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Like
so you would say, like, where I'm saying we are learning from our mistakes in this evolutionary process is chiseling out the statue of a moral and ethical structure that's going to be better for the future of humanity. You would say that that statue we're chiseling is like predetermined by God, and we're just like chiseling away the mud around the edges.
Yeah, that's a great way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as we discover it, we realize how immoral things that we've done are.
Yeah.
And I think people disagree about like we agree on certain things and then we disagree on how to get there.
Yeah.
It's like we all know it's right to help the poor.
Yeah.
Because I think that's like a objective moral truth imposed on us by God. But
yeah.
I think that we would disagree on how to help the poor.
Yeah.
But we agree on that we should help the poor, I guess.
People, we can debate about whether or not human nature is good or evil and all this stuff. But I think most people, when they see other people suffering, they want to help them.
Yeah.
You know.
So that would be, I guess, the biggest thing about Christianity that I see is I do see a need for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I see a brokenness to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the solution to that that Christ offers us is true.
Okay. Yeah.
And we can maybe get into some of that.
Yeah.
But the next question was, how do you think about the world?
How do I think about the world? Oh, well, is that where I was talking about like the physical laws of the universe and that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. So what is your worldview then? I mean, one question I would have is how do you reconcile your, the physical laws and the biblical interpretations and using a book as a guide for understanding the universe?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't think it's a book of science. I wouldn't say that, but I think it does make certain claims.
Yeah.
And there's debate about, like, is it 6 days or is it 6 time periods or whatever?
Yeah.
And, we can talk about things that might change my mind. We'll get to that in a minute about, like, old earth versus new earth creationists or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question was just sort of like,
how do you reconcile that with
like,
science?
what's your framework, I guess? I guess I would say that, like, because that was more what I was talking about, like, my framework for viewing the world. And so, like, what's your framework for how you understand the world, the universe we live in? How you discover truths about the universe,
Great question. So, I would say if God, I do believe God made the world.
Yeah.
So I think there should be an imprint of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there should be evidence of us being a product of his creation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, the moral law that we do feel this need for forgiveness, I feel like we're hardwired to recognize when things are bad.
Yeah.
Because we're creating his image and we know what right is.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't acknowledge that is God.
Yeah.
So I think there's the huge moral aspect of it that I think makes a lot of sense in light of God.
Mm-hmm.
Origin of the universe, like, how do you get something from nothing?
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense you'd have, like, a being that's outside of matter and space and time, because like, God is timeless. So if you're going to have a beginning, before the beginning there has to be something that's timeless. If time, matter, and space, which Einstein proved, like, time and space are connected, like, when you move through space fast, your experience of time is slow. So, like, those things are connected, like, it's a created thing. I think that makes a lot of sense from a theological view or a theistic view.
Okay.
So I think big picture things, morality, beginning of the universe, laws of nature, laws of logic, those kind of laws, like, they're there because that's God's nature. And he can't create an illogical universe. I guess he could, but I think he would be an illogical God. So I think a lot of the logic of nature, the repeatability of nature, is evidence of God being logical, God having a perfect standard of morality, and all of those things being the product of his creation.
Okay.
So I think big picture things makes a lot of sense. When you get into a lot of the weeds, I think you can start having a lot more debate. But
no, I mean, I understand that it makes sense. I guess that would, I don't know if I phrased that right, because, everything everyone believes makes sense to them, right?
Right.
So I guess my question would be more along the lines of, like, how do you approach things that, like, conflicts that are going to inevitably arise, like what I was talking about with, I'm trying to think of something that's not like evolutionary processes, but like, thermodynamics or this, let me think of another example, maybe. Like another thing that, I studied linguistics for a long time, right? And in the Bible, there's that story of the Tower of Babel where all the languages are created and stuff. And, we know how languages arise and how they evolve and how they develop over time, etc. And we can observe this. There's something called pidgin languages or pigeon languages, however you describe it, So when you're presented with that, that data, and the story that you want to be, is also part of your basis for morality that is true, how do you go about reconciling those things that happen like that? I try to pick something that's not controversial as evolution, just like languages or whatever,
Well, with that, I know nothing about that. So,
okay.
But if
that's
I
just
was
like in
confronted
general,
with
you know what I'm
that,
saying? Yeah.
I would say it all comes back to, so, like, mere Christianity would be Christ came to this earth. He's God in the flesh.
Yeah.
He died on the cross and he rose again from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
If that is true,
Yeah.
then I'm going to trust what that guy said about stuff.
Okay. So
I would view it all through the lens of Christ as far as I am able.
yeah.
And if like Christ quotes from most of the Old Testament,
Yeah.
and he quotes from figures that have been debated, are they historical or not? Christ clearly thought they were. So if he did rise from the dead, and that's true, then I'm going to trust what that guy says about these other people.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would view it through the lens of that. When you come to things that are seemingly contradictory or maybe don't reconcile with science, I mean, you got to kind of just do a bunch of research and see what makes sense.
Okay. So I think I'm going to try to rephrase that and then tell me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So like how my sort of axioms for understanding the universe were like, okay, we have these physical laws. I can clearly test them. They make predictions, and I'm just going to, run my test, and that's what I'm going to use to understand. Yours would be that, but also like, well, maybe not that. First of all, your primary axioms are going to be, Jesus being God, coming to earth and being born for people's sins, and that being true. So that's going to be your like 3 axioms that you're saying are my default beliefs that are true regardless. Like I'm saying these physical laws are true in my sense of truth until, proven false.
Pretty
like
much,
that's kind of like the basis on which you're basing things. Now you're not saying that I'm not going to use those physical laws that I'm using or the evidence from some new research field or whatever. You're just saying I'm going to view it based on these axioms, which I know are true. So if this thing conflicts that, well, clearly it must be wrong.
Yeah, and I mean, I could be proven wrong. Like even Paul said, if Christ didn't raise from the dead, our faith is in vain. Like our entire religion is pointless.
No.
Our faith is pointless.
Okay.
So it's not like it's not possible to falsify. You just got to find the body.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of explanations of what could have happened. Maybe we can get into some of those. But I would say I try to view it through that lens. And I definitely didn't become a Christian because I did a bunch of research and it was the most logical option. Like that's not at all why I became a Christian. I became a Christian because I recognized how evil I was. Yeah. And I saw it as the ultimate solution for my ultimate evil. Yeah. And I know that's not the great scientific answer you want to hear. Like, I know you got apologists who are like, man, you just line it up like this and you just prove it right perfect. Like, that's not my story. Yeah. And I'm just being honest. Like, it was recognizing how evil I was.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I wouldn't make any claims that I, like, rigorously research everything and all that kind of stuff either. You know?
And I know you're not saying that. But
yeah. No, but I'm just saying we're both going through life just trying to understand the universe, and one goal I did have that has kind of been a guiding light for me has always been, I just want to understand like how it actually works, Yeah. Because and I want to build things that really work, And that's where I think I talked about this before, but like when I was studying evolution, some of the things that really convinced me that at least this is like Newton, like maybe some genius comes around in a couple hundred years and figures out like all these things about evolution are false and stuff. But like, I could use the mathematical equations to build like AI, that was better. Like it could solve problems, Right. So I know it's at least practical. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so those are things that at least convince me of the utility of something.
Yeah. And I definitely see the practicality of a lot of the evolutionary theory. It's just like, how far do you take it is where I run into problems with it. But I definitely see like related species, looking at proteins, where do they come from, that kind of stuff. I think it's fascinating. Yeah. And I love studying it. Yeah. It's just when you get so far back with these distances and where humans came from. Yeah. Like, okay, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll admit, like, I don't know. And I don't have a dog in the fight, really.
Yeah, I definitely do. I'm very biased, I guess.
Yeah. Like, I mean, everything I've ever read about the origin of life is just like, whatever. Basically, we have no clue,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's definitely, that'll be, hopefully in the next 100 years, we'll have some more interesting discussions about that.
That's the thing that's amazing. It's like how much progress we continue to make, and will continue to make. That's the thing I love. It's like, even in the past 20 years, all the things we've learned about artificial intelligence, et cetera, like how much further we've gotten,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, we're getting down to the last few questions here. Mm-hmm. The next one was, we asked you, how do you view Christianity? So then how do I view Christianity?
Yeah.
I would say I see it as a lifelong journey to understand who God is.
Okay.
And I think it starts with that relationship, of course. But I don't think it's something where it's like, oh, I'm a Christian now. I have no doubts. I'm sure about everything, and I've got it all figured out.
Yeah.
I think it's the complete opposite of that. I think the more you study it, the more small you feel.
Yeah.
And the more big God feels. And the more you learn and the more you realize you don't have the answers to everything.
Yeah.
But you do feel like you are learning a lot about why you're here, the meaning of life. I think that's a huge part. I don't even know if I talked about it. But I feel like Christianity offers me a meaning in life that I don't think I could get anywhere else.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would think I definitely kind of agree with that. Like most religions say this is like if you're a man or if you're a woman, this is the path for your life and this is what is going to give you meaning and make you fulfilled. And they kind of outline it for you, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So I would say, I would completely agree with that statement.
So for how I view Christianity would basically be, it's a lifetime search for answers. Starts at a moment of faith, and it's a lifetime of wanting to know who, as much as you can about this guy.
Yeah.
Like, I know he loves me. I know what he did for me. And I'd love to learn more about him and tell other people about him. So I find a lot of meaning out of it.
Yeah. Well, that's good, man. Yeah.
So then the last couple of questions would be view of God and what would it take to change my mind about Christianity? Yeah. And I guess it's kind of like the same question for you.
Well,
it's kind of hard to think
what
about.
I would say is, what would convince you to question your axioms? Because I've thought about that too. What would be evidence? And I should have probably answered it this way, but like for me to, like any, and the problem is the only thing I could come up with is kind of like what I already do, you know? So if you have an idea, I would more than welcome it. But, you know, like say we've got something like, you know, these simple projectile equations, you know, and I run it and then it's like, well, it didn't behave at all like how the equation is predicted. So the equation, there's clearly something wrong with the equation, you know? Right. So I got to go back to the table and reevaluate the whole thing, right? So it would be something like that, where it's like the physical laws of the universe, you don't remain constant, you know? Yeah. And there's nothing guaranteeing it, you know, just because the sun's rose every day for however many hundreds of thousands of years doesn't guarantee it'll raise tomorrow, you know? Yeah. And there is something about this idea that, you know, functions doesn't mean it has to be continuous to infinity. It could just go and then stop, and that's it. It's undefined. So it's like all the laws of the universe are defined up to today. Tomorrow, they're not defined anymore. The whole universe explodes. Well, we don't know that couldn't happen. But sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you with what you were saying.
Oh, no, that's good thoughts. And I think the biggest thing would be that would cast a lot of doubt would be they dig up a grave and they're like, this is clearly Jesus' body. Yeah. It's near where he lived. It's near where he died. Like, we have evidence that Joseph put his body here and they hid him. And then he lived a life, helped these people write these stories, and then he died. Like, that would be very like, whoa.
Would that actually... But the problem is, how would that change your axioms through which you're viewing it?
Well, that's he's not who he said he was.
But you're assuming that what he said he was true. Those are your axioms. Yeah. Like, I'm assuming that the physical laws of the universe are valid, you know? Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So when you evaluate that research, that's going to be your bias. So what's going to make you question the bias?
Yeah, it would be really hard.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, what can I think of that would make me question that bias?
It would definitely put me in a place of extreme doubt, though.
Oh, okay.
And I would have to really like reevaluate my life. And Paul says we should just abandon it. You know, like if Jesus ain't rose, just abandon this. Like it's not true. But he was obviously convinced that he did. Because, you know, he saw him on the road to Damascus. Yeah. Or at least that's his claim after having
Did
killed
Jesus
Christians.
say he would rise from the dead?
In ways. He says it pretty much straight up, and then he talks about the temple being destroyed and rose again in 3 days. Yeah. And like his body.
What does he say when you say he says it pretty much straight up? You know,
I actually read it the other day.
Yeah. I wonder where that is. That in John or is it in one of the earlier?
Well, I'm reading through Matthew. Let me see.
So that would be interesting. Because one thing that I'm sure you know, but anyone who's like read through the New Testament, especially in the order it was written in, like just read the books in the order in which they were written in, is that Paul is very influential in terms of what Christianity is. Yeah. Like if you would just sometimes don't read Paul and just read the rest. Yeah. Like, what does just Jesus say, and not Paul or other people about what Jesus said?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's they call that Pauline, like, that's like a lot of progressive Christians. They feel like Paul's wrong.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, that's a Pauline doctrine, and then they just kind of toss it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think Paul's testimony is one of the most convincing testimonies.
Yeah.
Because he was killing Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, dude, you're killing these people. You're at the top of the food chain in your religion.
Well, we
Why
also
would you
have his
go
writings
down
about himself. It's not a lot of the writings too. If you look at it and say, who do we know wrote this, and then like, what are they saying? So, for instance, like feeding the 5,000, or like people being martyred for Christ or whatever. It's like those, we don't have the writings of those people. It's just like one reference, and who's writing that reference, you know? But with Paul, it's him actually writing it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even I'm sure you know that, like, even secular scholars are like, yeah, Paul's a pretty convincing guy. Like, that's pretty crazy what he did.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that he saw like an actual hallucination.
Yes.
Because he actually became that radical.
Yeah, that's one of the explanations. Yeah.
So I think he's pretty compelling, but so I trust what he says. But go into this verse where he, maybe, I hope this is it. Let's see. Okay, it says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And then he must be killed, and on the third day raised to life.
Okay.
And then Peter says, never, Lord. And he says, or Peter says, this shall never happen to you. And then Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there's the whole temple thing, which I may be taking
that
out
was
context.
Matthew, you said, right?
Matthew 16.
Yeah. Okay.
We just got a couple
So
minutes
it's not,
left.
but it's still not a direct quote. It's someone saying what he was saying.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's
it all
Matthew
is.
saying what he was saying. It's not like the Sermon on the Mount
Well, even that would be.
saying what he's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, oh, you're saying like in quotations.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like he said
that
this.
part was not
Yeah,
quotations.
yeah. But still, that's pretty. I mean, it's like he. What was it? Would go there and be raised to life after 3 days. That's what it was. I think raised
I
to
exited
life,
out of
right?
it, but it basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time. We just got about 5 minutes left. So maybe final thoughts, because we're at an hour. Oh no, we got paid off.
What?
I thought we had 5 minutes left, but we've got like 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So I guess we'll still get to final thoughts. The last question was view of God.
Yeah.
And let's get into the Trinity, because I think that is a big, huge differentiating factor between Christianity and other religions.
Yeah.
And with Christianity, or as human beings made in the image of God, we can love. We have the capacity to love.
Yeah.
Whether you're a Christian or not, like, clearly you see people's love for people.
Yeah.
And I think within the Trinity itself, like Jesus says, you're going to love others like my Father loves me.
Yeah.
Like he loved me before I came to the earth, to the world. So the us being made in his image, having those qualities, the need for fellowship, like there's fellowship within the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And we want fellowship. There's love within the Trinity, and we are modeling that, even though even if we don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Like being made in his image, we naturally model these characteristics of God.
Yeah.
Like that's God's common grace, as a Reformed person would say. Like we have these gracious gifts of his, whether we're Christians or not. Creativity and those sorts of things.
Do you want me to comment that?
Oh, yeah,
'Cause I do have a comment. Okay.
That's just the whole.
So my thing would be like, I totally see that, but my thing would be, why do you not model other characteristics that are clearly negative? Like the wrath of God, or just the genocide of God.
Yeah. Well,
so which humans clearly also do. So in that sense, you could say we're modeling the genocide of God. And then it's a less compelling story.
Yeah. Well, I would say his justice is something to model.
Yeah.
And his wrath would be too. I just think we as not being perfect as he is, there's no way we can model all these things perfectly.
So you think
but we should strive for justice.
So when you said like his justice, would that include like some of the things in the Old Testament was like go in and kill all the tribes and that kind of thing?
Well, those are very like, and we
specific,
talk about
but
very specific, time sensitive things. Like I don't think today I'm commanded to go kill the Canaanites.
Yeah.
Like that was a specific command, and those people were sacrificing babies. They were burning them alive.
Yeah.
So like there's people. I mean, I'm not gonna say anybody. We all deserve to die.
Yeah.
But there was some pretty sick stuff going on back then.
Yeah.
And I don't understand all that Old Testament stuff.
Okay.
But some things I've heard explanations for, and I'm like, that seems reasonable.
Okay.
But we can get into more of that if you want to.
No, I mean, I'm not big in on genocide, you know.
But yeah, I think it's just hardwired into us to model these qualities of God, even whether we realize it or not.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I think the Trinity, something I've thought about a lot lately is how the Trinity is a reflection, like us being made in his image. It's that Trinitarian image.
Yeah.
Which is different than just being made in God's image.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've read, and in a way, I understand the Trinity thing. In the way that, like, you know, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, he's all things in three parts. Like, what do you call it? Body, soul, mind, that kind of thing, but all one person, right?
Yeah.
So there's a way to understand that. But I think, you know, for me, it still makes no sense.
It's very confusing.
Well, it makes no sense in the, like, just normal. It makes sense in the way quantum mechanics makes sense, right? Like, quantum mechanics, I can do the little equations and get the result, but it's like, I don't understand the result.
Yeah. So
you know?
you can apprehend it, but you can't comprehend it.
I mean, I don't know the definition of those two terms, so.
I think apprehend means you kind of have an idea what's happening.
Like,
but comprehend, it's like, oh, I have a comprehensive understanding of this.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, I can say
happening.
the words and know what each sentence means, but like all the sentences together, don't understand it.
Yeah.
You know? That kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would say I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But I think I can get an idea of what it's saying.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. If anyone says they completely understand exactly everything about the Trinity, I would say you probably don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or you're not being honest, because it is very confusing. But I guess one analogy I use, like my Sunday school class, or if people ask me about it, like water can be vapor, ice, or liquid. Yeah. But it's all water. Different presentations of the same substance. Yeah. We wouldn't say water vapor is less important than ice. Yeah. There's different uses, different expressions of the same substance.
Yeah.
So that's how I would describe.
That's pretty good, I guess. I'm trying to think if that could also be used to, like, yeah, I mean, maybe. I think you could also think of it as a stream and a pool or something. Like, water's pretty good metaphor maybe for understanding that. Well, I'm thinking about the particular problem of, like, you know, God birthing himself type thing.
Yes. Yeah, that is a whole nother can of worms. Yeah. It is. And there's a lot of verses that are really confusing about that. Yeah. Like when Christ says, no one knows when I'm coming back, not even the Son. Yeah. It's like, what? You're God. You're all-knowing. How do you not know when you're coming back? Like, no one knows that day or hour. And one of the explanations I've heard because he has the human form.
He's human.
And he has the divine, right? Like in a human form, you have a human brain, and perhaps there were limitations to memory because his human mind can only remember so many things in his incarnation. Okay. People debate that, though. I don't know. But there are interesting discussions about that. And Jehovah's Witnesses would take that as an example of, oh, he's not God. Yeah. Because he doesn't know everything.
So are Jehovah's Witnesses not Trinitarians? No. Are they Unitarians?
I don't know how they exactly describe themselves, but they definitely don't believe Jesus is fully God. Okay. Yeah. Like in John 1:1, it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. In the New World Translation, their version says, and he was a God, lowercase g. Yeah. And then anywhere where there might seem like Jesus is God, they sort of conveniently translate it into, you know, a lowercase g or something like that.
Okay. Huh. Interesting.
So, final thoughts. We got a couple minutes.
Okay. Final thoughts on anything? I don't know. I was just thinking about something interesting that we could talk about, but now I forgot it. What was it?
Okay. I guess this is a good place to end.
I mean, we had the morality and ethics thing. There's a lot of sort of sidetracks we could take, you know, on different stuff. But the problem, I think, is going to be that in the details. Yeah. Because you know how it is when you read something and then it's been like a while since you've read it or whatever. Like you remember sort of conclusions you made or aspects of it, but the details like the actual reference you're not going to remember.
Yeah.
Like for instance, in the New Testament, there's many places I feel like where Oh, that's what you're talking about, where you were talking about, he said, that quote where it's like, I don't know when I'm coming back or whatever.
Right.
Then there's many places I seem to recall in the New Testament where he's like, coming back in this generation. Like,
yes.
prepare, because I'm immediately coming back,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
I was reading about that one because I still haven't found a really good answer for that one.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then there's things where he'll straight up say, the Father's greater than I.
Yeah. Stuff
and
like
things
that.
like that. Yeah.
And then that thought reminded me of something else, which is like, there's all these things in the Bible, like every religion basically has all these prophecies that come true, right? And, take that for what you will, but it's like all the ones that come true are the ones that, clearly show that it's the supreme, like that's the word of the God that whatever you're worshiping. And then all the ones that don't come true are reinterpreted such that it's still true. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, it's impossible for your religion to be false.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So like, if there's a verse in the Bible, like that would be an interesting thing to talk about. Like, how do you deal with those types of things?
Yeah. And I think that specific one was about the kingdom of God. Like, you will be alive when you see the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And I want to say an explanation for that was his resurrection, but I'm not sure. And I don't want to say that. Like, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have to look into
There's
that.
going to be a lot of us being like, I'm not really sure about this.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll kind of leave that.
And I remember when I looked into that specific question, I was like, dang, I feel like there's better answers here.
Yeah.
So I really need to study that one more.
Yeah. But anyway, it's fun. Like, for me personally, another thing I would say is I actually love studying all these religions because you learn so many things of them. Like, maybe we should talk about in one of the next podcasts some of the religions I've studied, like their core values and why I think they're very useful. And of all the religions I've studied, to me, the ones that pack the biggest bang for your buck is by far Buddhism. Then I would say Stoicism, really close though. Well, by far, let me think. Stoicism's good. I haven't studied as much because Buddhism was like such a big like eye opener. And then Taoism has some really interesting ideas that like this idea or this concept's really good, but as a whole religion, I don't know if it would like give you enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, those three are really interesting. I feel like no one ever studies them or knows anything about them.
I know almost nothing about any of those things you just mentioned. So that would be good. I would learn a lot for sure. Well, John, thank you for doing another episode, man.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. That was really fun, man.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Wish I had you here more often. He's visiting from Germany, just a few hundred yards from a Ukrainian war.
Yeah, just a long walk over the pond.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for coming on. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. If you'll head over to our website, we'd love for you to sign up to be a part of SFR Plus, and you can become a part of our community there. And please like and subscribe. Thanks.